Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to stand up and speak firmly against Bill C-19, an act to amend the Criminal Code and Firearms Act, ending the Long Gun Registry Act. In short, for any Canadians watching, I think a fair summary of this legislation would say that it's going to do two things. Number one, it'll eliminate the requirement to register non-restricted firearms or long guns, and number two, this bill would destroy existing records of long gun registration that are currently held in the computer system accessed by police. As a registration certificate will no longer be required to possess a non-restricted firearm if this bill passes, certain offences in the Firearms Act are amended or repealed. The Criminal Code would also be amended so that failure to hold a registration certificate for a non-restricted firearm would not give rise to any of the offences relating to unauthorized possession of a firearm, and it would not allow police to seize a firearm. Previous versions of government bills to dismantle the registry, Mr. Speaker, did have a requirement for people to check that a person they are selling or giving away their long gun to was a licensed firearm owner. Earlier versions of this bill also allowed for businesses to keep records of the sale of long guns, as was the practice prior to the registry. This bill contains neither provision. Now, Mr. Speaker, what I've learned since coming to this House and participating in this debate over the last 3.5 years has been that this is a big country and we bring many different sensibilities to this debate on the long gun registry. I've noticed that there are differences regionally, socially, and culturally. I think that part of a healthy democracy is that people come from various parts of our broad fabric and they bring the different perspectives of the people that live in their riding, and I think that's healthy. And I think that's informed this debate, and I want to commend all members of the House for their contributions to this debate. But I also want to give my particular position on this bill and also try to represent what I think is the broad consensus of the people in Vancouver Kingsway. And here's how I basically approach the issue of gun registration. I operate from the assumption that a firearm, whether it's a long gun or a handgun, any kind of gun, is inherently a dangerous product. It's one of those products that, when used exactly as designed, has the capacity to harm, injure, and kill people, or anything living. I come from the basic position that anybody who has a right to own such an implement has a corresponding responsibility and duty to make sure that that dangerous product has got certain parameters around it. Those include knowing where that object is and making sure that that object it cannot be used to hurt other people. I come from the general perspective that tracking the possession of that implement, tracking the sale of it, is a good thing. I come from the point of view that us knowing where those dangerous items are is something that makes our society safer. I also have come to believe, after talking to many police officers across this country, that the gun registry helps them solve crimes. We all know that there's many thefts and break-ins across this country on a daily basis. None of us like that, but it's a reality of Canadian life. And when a gun is stolen and subsequently used in a crime, I'm told by police officers that locating that gun and finding out where it was originally registered and what residence it was registered to helps them to trace back that weapon to its original owner and helps them ultimately solve crime as a piece of evidence. And I think that a gun registry imbues those who own guns with a feeling of responsibility. Now, it's been said a few times, and I don't want to make light of this, that in our country we license dogs, we license cars, we license certain fertilizers because those are constituent parts that can be used to make bombs. We make people go into hardware stores across this country and we make those stores keep a registry of people who buy simple fertilizers because we recognize that it's a dangerous product and if it gets in the wrong hands, it can cause injury and death. And I also think, Mr. Speaker, of the balance of convenience. I ask myself, what is being asked of Canadians when we establish a gun registry? And what we're asking of those people is that they take a weapon, and as a consequence of their privilege and right to own that weapon, that they simply fill out a registration that indicates to authorities in a registry that they are the registered owner of that particular item. And I think, what is the inconvenience that I'm causing that person? And I've heard a lot of rhetoric. I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric on all sides of this House on this issue, I think. And I think when we talk about what we're asking our duck hunters and our farmers to do, in my view, in my sincerely held belief, is not asking much. It's not asking them to give up their right to own a firearm. They can own 10 firearms if they want. It's simply asking them to register that firearm as a sign of responsibility, just like we would ask them if they went and purchased a car. And they would do that with no complaint. Now, there's been a lot of talk about there being no evidence, so-called by the government side, of the efficacy and effectiveness of the gun registry. And I have to say that that's just not my understanding, and it's not my research. The police forces across this land, the vast preponderance of police, are supportive of having a gun registry. Now, they're not unanimous, but there's no unanimity on any issue in this country. And I'll read a couple of quotes. Here's Chief Bill Blair. He's the Chief of Police in Toronto and the past president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. This is what he said. The registry gives officers information that keeps them safe. If the registry is taken from us, police officers may guess, but they cannot know. It could get them killed. Here's what Chief Daniel Parkinson, president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, said. Scrapping the federal firearms registry will put our officers at risk and undermine our ability to prevent and solve crimes. Now, this government talks a lot about victims, and they say that they claim to support the rights of victims better than any party in this House, which I doubt, but that's what they say. Well, here's what Sue O'Sullivan, the federal victims ombudsperson, said. Though there are varying points of view, the majority of victims groups we have spoken with continue to support keeping the long gun registry. End quote. Now, when my friends opposite stand up in this House and say there's no evidence from police or from victims or anybody in this country that the gun registry is desired or supported, well, that's just simply not true. Because, and I've just given you just a handful of what would be hundreds and hundreds of quotes from police officers, from victims groups, from people who work in the criminal justice system across this country who tell us on a daily basis that the long gun registry is effective in preventing crimes and solving crimes and keeping people safe, from police officers to women to people who might be contemplating suicide. Now, the thing that I find a little bit surprising in this debate is the Conservative side seems to want to have concrete proof positive of a direct causative relation between the gun registry and saving lives. Well, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Speaker, I don't need that. We accept many things in our life, and in this chamber, we make decisions, we pass laws that are based on our best educated information and the preponderance of evidence that if we take a certain step, it'll likely result in a different step. We do this with tax law, for instance. If we provide a tax cut to corporations, the government suggests that that will lead to certain behavior on behalf of corporations, that they will invest. So goes the argument. Do they have evidence of that? Do we have concrete empirical evidence of that? Probably not. But we make that decision based on our best evidence and our best reasoning. And the same thing I would respectfully suggest, Mr. Speaker, goes with the gun registry. That in a country, if you say to our people that if you want to own a firearms, a weapon that can kill and maim and injure, then if you register that weapon, it will make our country slightly safer. Now, that to me is intuitively correct. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to just talk a little bit about what differentiates our country from that to the south. And that is, in our country, we have long had much tighter regulation of firearms. And I've always felt that that makes Canada a safer place. We don't have the level of violence. We don't have the level of gun violence that they have in the United States. And I think a major reason for that, and I think Canadians support the fact that we have tighter regulation of guns. Now, the Conservative government says, well, you know, criminals won't register guns. Criminals don't register guns. But every single person on the other side of this House, the government side, says that they still want to have the registration process of the gun owner. Well, criminals don't apply for a firearms acquisition certificate either. So with the greatest of respect, Mr. Speaker, this is sound public policy. I agree that a lot of money has been wasted by previous governments, but that money is sunk. This is a valuable tool for police and the people of this country, and I urge all members of this House to put ideology aside and let's vote to keep our communities safe.
Questions and comments?